How many of you heard the gospel this morning? Okay. Okay. Shall we read just the first? Let's read the first 12 verses. Okay. Do I have a reader? Okay. Now hang on, we have to work with the mic because the people who are watching online can't hear us otherwise.
Okay, this is John 9, 1 through 41, but we're only going to do the first 12.
Right.
And the man born blind receives sight. As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents? And he was born blind. Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me. While it is day, night is coming, when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said that, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some were saying, it is he. Others were saying, no, but it is someone like him. He kept saying, I am he. But they kept asking him, then how were your eyes open? And he answered, the man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. Then I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, well, where is he? And he said, I do not know.
Okay, let's look at our first piece of art. Once again, we have a Duccio from the early 14th century. This was finished as part of the predella in the Maestra in Siena in 1311 when it was installed. And who do we see? We see Jesus and the disciples, and what is Jesus doing? Yep, he is pressing the mud onto the eyes of the blind men. Is this an intimate scene? Okay, so then let's cut this painting sort of 2/3 and 1/3. Do you see the same person wearing the same clothes on the other side? Yeah. Okay. And let me get the mic here where I can move it around better. So if you look here, he's got a stick. Okay, that's, a traditional sign of being blind. Even today, the way people walk. And so he's got a stick, he's wearing all these clothes, the same boots, the same leggings, the same jerkin. And then over here, what is he next to? Okay, well, if you get close, there's a lion's head here with water coming out of it. This is the pool, the fountain of Siloam. So he has washed his eyes and he's put down his stick. And what does that mean? He can see. Now, this was installed as a piece of a large artwork. It's huge. Okay, so there are all these other pieces of art that go with it. And the piece that was next to it or just above it was the Transfiguration. So in this, when the man starts to see, he's looking up at the transfigured Christ. who is helping people to see. Where is this particular painting set? Okay. Well, Duccio is a painter in Siena, in Italy. And, I did not go on the Holy Land tour, so I don't know if anyone who went on the tour is here today. Oh, okay. You did, okay. Is the Holy Land full of buildings that look like this?
Yes.
There are some, yeah.
Okay, there are some, okay. Well, this is sort of set. Maybe a little bit in the Holy Land, but a lot in Siena. It looks a lot like early 14th century Italy. With the tall walled towns, we saw the one earlier with a woman of Samaria with the wall up and everything. So here we have this beautiful site. What do you think of the colors? Yeah, they're Mediterranean, pinks and violets. There was a pink Mediterranean house in my neighborhood for years and it was lovely, but then somebody else painted it gold and it's sort of pathetic, but. What do you notice? Jesus, what's Jesus's headdress? So he's clearly identified as being Jesus. Yeah, it's really an egg-based and it's a flatter, duller finish than using an oil, but it does last long. So there are pros and cons of every particular kind of paint, but oils weren't in totally common usage at this time. There was a lot of egg tempera. And if we had the whole thing here, in front of us, we would look at all of these different scenes and we'd be able to notice that people are wearing the same clothes in much of this because people didn't have, whole closets full of clothes. They tended to wear the same thing every day. So Jesus is usually wearing a red, tunic and then a blue over shawl. So the clothing tends to be pretty predictable. Shall we go on to the next one? Now this is El Greco. So he was the Greek. Yeah, actually, his name in Greek is very long and hard to say, so I didn't actually even print it there, but he was the Greek. And his early education was in learning to paint icons. He was an icon painter. But eventually he went to Venice and he was hanging out with Veronese and Titian and Tintoretto. And that changed his painting style. It moved less into the sort of the set formal icon look and the more fluid painting of the early and middle Renaissance. What do you notice about this particular painting and how is it different than the last one we saw?
There are three different parts.
There are three different parts in this painting, yes. There's the group to the left, there's the middle scene, and then there's the group to the right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. There's one behind. Yeah, Mary.
The blind man is sitting down, and Jesus' wardrobe is a little bit paler.
Yeah, the blind man, yeah, is kneeling down. Yeah, and
Yes.
Jesus' clothes are a little bit paler. Correct. Yeah.
And the disciples are on the other side, and they're kind of discussing what is going on.
yeah, there could be two groups here of people sort of discussing what's going on. One was the disciples and the other is the Pharisees, and they're both having trouble making sense of what's happening. And one of the things to remember about this particular story, and actually about the whole book of John, is that John is written, scholars think, about 80 AD. And it was written for a community where the Christians were sort of being thrown out of the synagogues finally by the Jews. So there was this friction between the Christian community and the Jewish community, and that's reflected in the text. So it's an unusually polemical gospel in terms of relations between Jews and Christians. But it has to do more with the setting than really with any particular way that we need to continue to think about that community of faith that essentially Christianity came out of. So let's, what else? So what else do you notice about the colors? There are a lot more colors in this particular painting than there were in the last one. Okay. What about the little details of daily life? Yeah, there's either a little kitty cat or a dog here. There's jugs for going for water. There's bags of stuff for carrying around. This is like an opening scene. And there's a lot happening in this. There's more happening in this painting than there was in the last one. Now I want you to notice where Jesus is in relation to the building, because El Greco painted 3 paintings of this scene, and Jesus moves. So can we move on to the next one, Rebecca? Okay, so the last one was painted in 1567, and it's in the museum in Dresden, in the Gemäldegalerie Gallery, Meister Alta, in Dresden. This one is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it was painted around 1570, and it was never actually really finished. And this one appears to have been brought by El Greco to Italy when he left Spain in 1570, or when he went to Spain to paint for King Philip. It was brought with him. The others were finished and were sold to patrons, whereas this one he brought with him. One of the things that I find surprising here is sort of the variety of people, the ethnicity of people who are here. And the number of people sort of in different types of dress. So it's a more inclusive painting than much of what we've seen in other presentations. There's a gentleman down here who clearly looks more African than European. And the person in the striped outfit there on the right, the furthest right, she or he look a little more exotic than some of the other people in the painting. What else are you noticing? Okay, let's do.
I know.
Yeah, we have to use the mics if we could, because the people online and the people who watch
okay.
later.
This is Deanne, and it looks like the depression that the man is standing in kind of reminds me of that other healing story where there was a pool.
Yeah. Okay, and who do you think those people might be? Well, in the story that we read, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So who might that be? That might be his parents, because they come up later in the story. Well, yeah, Mark.
Well, I noticed there's not a lot of natural landscape, greenery, shrubbery, little olive trees and pots, but I do like the sky.
because during this time, he's adding more buildings and architectural features to his painting and really learning how to use the vanishing points in his art. So this is an experiment in adding depth and adding vanishing points. So those of you who were here with me when we studied the Annunciation in December will remember the day that we spent looking at the Last Supper, when we looked at the Annunciation by Fra Angelico to learn about vanishing point. So here he's also playing with vanishing point. And if you, the easiest way to see a vanishing point is to go look at a railroad track and see where it crosses in the distance. So that's what we're talking about here. Anything else that we want to notice about this particular painting?
Do we know anything about the people in the background? They were also in the other painting.
No, we don't really know anything. It's a large setting, and it's, I mean, it's a major history painting in that it's sort of like a David Lean epic. You know, there are a lot of people there. You bring in all the extras. So I mean, he's doing this in a very public situation. So there's a little blowback at the far end of it because it's been witnessed by so many people. He's not doing this in secret. This is a major public event and everybody sort of has an opportunity to see it. Oh, hang, let's wait for the mic.
I'd like to know, you see Christ there applying the mud, and
Yeah.
you see all the people on the right kind of referring to it. You see the two people in the front referring to it. There's a guy on the left who's pointing to the moon or something. And I wonder, what's the matter with him? How come he isn't paying attention to the scene?
I have no idea, but he does have very nice musculature. Greco could have been showing off again. His facility with painting somewhat semi-nude men. So I think that's it's very interesting, and I also noticed that the man who is being healed is, if this man is his father, the skin tones are somewhat similar. Okay, let's look at the next one. This is also, El Greco painted 3 of these, okay? Yeah, do you have something? Oh, you're. Oh, that man is still pointing, okay. But notice where Jesus is. He's moved even further to the right, to the center of the painting. Okay, now this one was commissioned by the Farnese family, which is a very powerful family. The Archduke of Parma was a member of, the Archduke of Parma was a member of the Farnese family. One of the cardinals was a member of the Farnese family. This particular Archduke was considered the single best commander of troops in Europe at the time. This is a very, very powerful family. And they know it was commissioned by the Farneses, but because there's a seal of the Farnese family on the back of it. Okay, are you noticing any 2 people whose costumings are a little bit different than some of the other people in the painting? On the far left? Okay, very, very good. Okay. Anyone else who's a little bit different? Yeah. Okay. So, and your name again? I'm Sandy. Sandy's just pointed out that the woman between Jesus and the guy who's pointing looks a little bit different, and she thinks she's a woman. And
Composition
the
artist,
plaid shirt guy,
Bible verse, all that.
Jerry. Okay, Jerry and Jackie. Okay, I'm trying so hard. I'm so old. Thinks that the guy all the way on the left is dressed. The costuming is different. Yeah. And your name again?
Judy,
Judy.
I'm really distracted by this half-dressed guy that's pointing up. You know, it takes,
Anything earlier?
you look at that painting and it's perfect without him. He's really disturbing. He's distracting.
Distracting. And partly you get a line coming down here, pretty much straight.
After the 9 o'clock.
Get a lower group of people sort of chit-chatting or murmuring is the word that we hear in the gospel.
So,
Get this guy with
results.
musculature, but then there's another half guy, naked guy, who's even better musculature.
Still in the stratosphere.
So there are a lot of distracting
It's
things
well
sort of
said.
happening there.
Have A,
But
stuff
now
to
that
do
we've
with
noticed these two
Oh,
people,
food
and we've
water.
noticed that Jesus has moved even further into the center, we move on to the
Okay.
next
When you did
slide.
the Mexican restaurant. You know.
Okay, this is Alexander Farnese, Duke of Parma, painted by Otto von Wien, and Ranuccio Farnese, who's a cardinal, who's painted by Titian.
I don't go out.
These two gentlemen are portrayed in the painting.
Fish taco.
So this, the Duke is here on the left, and I think the person who looks like a woman is this Ranuccio Farnese, who was actually painted after he died and was sort of added to the painting as a tribute to the family who paid the commission. So Jesus has had to move even further to the right
Affected with it.
to allow the two patrons to be included in the painting on that side.
Right. That was the only.
One of the things that's,
I think, huh? I mean, you know, yes.
well, the paintings were, it was not at all unusual
I know that part.
for paintings to have their patrons or the patron saints of the towns added to them as a sign of veneration or adoration, or
I'm just saying that sometimes Jesus' message gets
It
moved.
was feeling down.
that's very good. And you caught me in a blind spot there.
So it took me for Epstein Barr.
Yes, Mark.
So the cardinal looks so young, though. That's very
Mhm.
striking. And was that normal, or can you become a cardinal when you're that young? And it's just a birth title, or?
Guillaume
This
Barré.
was,
So
when
anyway,
it looked
let's
more
see
like
what Stacy says tomorrow.
there that was in the painting than the only, I could find an engraving of him as a cardinal and as an older gentleman, but it didn't really resemble
So
what
I
was
have
there. So
vaccination.
since he had already died, the painter, El
just-
Greco, may only have seen the Titian. That might have been his only reference for actually doing a painting of this
And
scale
this is-
and size
I actually don't
and
want
for
that.
people with this kind of influence.
I have no surety. of really where I
So
got
it's
that.
interesting to see how art changes
just think
based
it's
on
odd.
partly who's paying the bill and partly what your audience is. So if your audience is the Farnese family, you add members to the picture. And this is the latest of the three. I think this is 1573 that this one's painted. It is rather interesting to see all of this. Now let's move on to the next one. This is Christ healing the blind man by Guacchino Cereto. I'm not perfectly sure of how to say that. I did not have time to do, you can put it into Google, how do I say? And I ran out of time to do that. So this is painted 1640. So we moved into the 17th century now. So Acerteto was a very sort of was a history painter. So he did biblical scenes, he did history scenes, he did mythological scenes.
Oh, from Carrot Cake.
And
I think so. He
was active in Genoa, and then he went to Rome, and he was greatly influenced by Caravaggio. So do you remember the a deposition of Christ painting that was, that Pastor Amy showed. It was the last painting that she showed,
You'll have a constitution on.
the day that she was talking about Nicodemus. Nicodemus came by night. It was all black and Christ was coming off the cross. It's a very, very famous painting by Caravaggio. So Azaretto became fascinated with the realism of Caravaggio. What's different in tone and what's different in scale? You know, how has he framed the picture?
You're right up close. It's very intimate. Very, very close. I also noticed that blind man is quite old, so I wonder about his parents being in the picture.
Yeah, well, his costume designer, yeah, he chose a different theme there, but I had the same thoughts when I saw that too. What else are you noticing? Yeah, first we'll do
Yeah.
Elizabeth and then we'll come over. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's Caravaggio is really noted for his light, and this is an example of that. With all the background is black and the light is on the central figures.
Yeah. And there's a specific technique, and I got a slide on that next, so that we can talk about the painting techniques that he's using to achieve these effects. Okay, now, can you remind me of your name again, please?
Ernie,
Ernie, okay.
the light seems to be on the skin parts of the people, on the arm, on the hands, and on the faces. Not so much on the clothing, but that seems to be a major a line there that goes across and then comes on down, and it's that hand that is drawing my focus right now, that is below the elbow of the other man, and there seems to be a design there.
This hand, are you noticing, Ernie?
The hand below the elbow of, yes.
Okay, so the young boy's hand.
Yes, and that seems to be the line that goes across the top of faces, then comes back down along the arm of the man, and then back out to the young boy.
Yeah.
That's yes.
So there is sort of a line that goes here,
Yes,
and then there's
a
three.
Z line.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, it goes up over here actually with his stick. So you see the stick that goes with the blind man over here on the right. How, if you were, okay, so you're doing the movie, how are you going to do this shot? Is this a pan shot or is this a close-up? So this is a close-up. So this changes up your sort of lighting and staging for this kind of thing. So does this require a cast of thousands like the last picture? So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 or 7. It's a small group of people. 7. There's 7 people here. And how close are all these people as compared to the El Greco painting? Yeah, they're very close. They're right up next to each other. I am endlessly struck by the intimacy of this scene. You know, when Pastor Frank preaches, he's in the pulpit and everybody else is out in the congregation. There's some distance generally. There's a lot of private space or public space between me and the back pew and him up in the pulpit. Whereas when we get into this kind of a scene, Jesus has moved into a far more, he's touching people's bodies. He's right up close. There are not that many people that I let touch me in that kind of intimate sense. Yeah,
It kind of reminds me of a baptism, actually, just the positioning and the close-up, like you said, the intimacy of it all.
yeah. And can you help me with your name again?
Kari, so.
Okay, Kari, thank you. It is, and baptisms are times when the pastors get to be very intimate with the families and the babies especially. That's a far more intimate kind of thing. Communion is a more intimate kind of experience in church. And this is a very, very intimate experience. So let's, yeah, Elizabeth. I think actually, there's no identification, so we're all just sort of theorizing between Jesus and the blind man. There's no notations in the text about a child being there at all, especially a child with a stein. He's got a cup there. The disciples are usually in attendance. But just who they are is really up to our imagination. Yes, Mark.
Well, speaking of imagination, if you didn't know the plot, Jesus is helping get a speck or a something foreign matter out of the person's eye. So if you look at these paintings cold, there may be a whole different interpretation.
Yes, so it's so if you are not, a Bible loving Lutheran who's read Egermeyer's every night before dinner or after dinner, your Bible studies, and you're looking at them cold, you might see this in a different light. Yeah.
It feels very physicianish with students watching on to me, like the way you're touched that way.
Yeah. Okay, let's do the next slide, Rebecca. Okay. So the sfumata technique is one of the techniques that Azaretto was working with. And this was made famous by Leonardo da Vinci. The Mona Lisa is one famous example of that. And this, the Virgin of the Rocks, is another. And Leonardo theorized that one should paint without lines so that everything sort of moves in without a hard line to it. And that's a sfumato technique. And this Italian word, it's hard to say, chiaroscuro. This is a technique that's more evident in the Caravaggio and in the Azaretto.
You feeling a little better, Shapa?
It's an Italian term which literally means light dark. In paintings, the description refers to clear tonal contrasts, which are often used to suggest the volume and modeling of the subjects depicted. So you get this sharp contrast between light and dark in these paintings. And that's a particular technique. And they play on the viewer's emotions. And the best painters knew very well what they were doing when they used them. So we're going to move to if you were in art history class, I'd make you practice saying the words, but since I'm not very good at them myself, I don't think we'll go down that route. Yes, Ernie?
Chiaroscuro in Italian, and as a musician and conductor, is referred to the clarity of sound, mostly of bass instruments. There is an extension available on many string instruments which allow the sound to be played lower and yet stay out of the way for normal playing. That's called chiaroscuro. And I am relating that to the color that you have just been talking about and the melding of sound.
So it's a way of adding tone and color to both music and to art. And I will have to learn more about that. So thank you very much. That's a very interesting comment, adding to our understanding of the painting. Well, our last, no, we have two more. So let's take a look at Poussin. And this is a French painter, Nicolas Poussin. This is at the Louvre in Paris. It's a large scale painting. Although, 47 by 67, 4 feet by 5.5 feet. And it has a very different feel to it. And Poussin is noted for his formalism.
No, thanks.
And for
Go ahead.
making balance though. But someone had mentioned that there wasn't much nature in the El Grecos. What are you seeing here, Mark?
My favorite so far.
Our favorite color.
People's a great, it just seems very inclusive and colorful. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And Jesus is wearing pink, which is highly unusual for any of the paintings that we've seen. We've not seen him in draped in pink yet. And there's a balance between orange and gold and blue and yellow and green. So and the scope is quite different. What's included here? There's a lot of scenery in this painting. So the town is far off. And this is the scene. So how much of the text? This is a text that's 41 verses long. There are a number of scenes in this text. So this text, how much of that text is Poussin showing? We noticed in the first painting, the Duccio, that he had two scenes in there. The putting the mud on Jesus on the eyes and then the going to the well. What do we have? What do we have here? Well, with the Grecos, we had both the healing and then we had all this murmuring that was going on all around. So we had those two aspects of the text.
Everything except the singing
Everything but the singing?
of the Marseillaise.
Wait.
Yes, I know, I see this, excuse me, but I do see this as a panorama to broaden our thoughts about what's going on. And I wasn't being irreverent by adding that little bit about it's got everything, here in this country, we say everything but the American flag and apple pie. And that's kind of the way I feel about this.
Okay, well, you notice that this is 47 by 67. Let's take a quick look at the next one. I guess because this is almost a paired painting. This is almost exactly the same size. It's also painted by Poussin. It's a little bit later. It's not from the Gospels, it's from Acts 3. So it's Saints Peter and John healing the lame man from Acts 3, 1 to 10. And it has a very different, far more formal feel to it, I think. Not that my feelings really matter. I much prefer the first one to this one. Yes, ma'am.
He is centering the focus of the painting differently in this one than in the previous one. It's much higher. He's got fewer, well, probably, no, he doesn't have as many people around him, but there's all these things going on the right and down on the left. But in the other one, the center of the focus was farther low on the painting.
Yeah, and he's sort of showing off a different technique here because he's sort of got the vanishing point in here. And this is a smaller scale, Poussin's riff on a painting, a very famous painting called School of Athens. And maybe next week I'll show that one so you can sort of see what that looks like. You've got it up? Oh, do you want to walk around with your phone? Okay, can you get the painter? Okay. So let's, in the few moments that we have left, because we're losing people who have worship duties at the next service, let's look at our last painting. And this is the earliest one. And this prefigures what we'll be studying next week. So I thought it was a good closeout and sort of catch your interest for what we'll be doing next week. What do we see here on the left?
Blind man.
Yeah, so here we have Jesus and the healing of the blind man. And here we have the raising of Lazarus. So this was a fresco that was removed from its original situation and put on a canvas. And it's now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So it's really originally in Spain, Castile Leon. It was painted circa 1129 to 34. It's anonymous. And I didn't convert it from centimeters into inches for you. Yes, sir.
How do they transfer?
Here, let's get the mic.
Fresco? I'm Alan. How do they transfer a fresco?
I have absolutely no idea. I would think they'd have to do that very, very, very carefully. But the Met has a very good supply of extraordinarily competent conservators, one of the largest departments in the world. So just how that happened, that was not on the blurb from the Met. Just how they did it wasn't there. So I'd have to do more research on that. Yes, Elizabeth?
Actually at the cloisters, which is the north end of, this is actually at the cloisters at the north end of Manhattan.
Yeah. So the cloisters is in Fort Tryon Park, which actually was a gift to the Met from John D. Rockefeller Jr. He bought a bunch of cloisters in France and had them disassembled and shipped across and put back up.
And then he bought the property across the river, so I had a nice view. Yeah.
It helps to be the richest man in America. Yes, Ernie.
The longer I look at the faces, the more I see. And I think this is done on purpose for us to be in contact with the people who are there and observing what is going on. When I first looked at this, I could not see anything in terms of the detail of the faces, but now I see there are beards and stashes. Some of them even have eyes now, which I could not see at the very beginning. And it's taken me this long to focus my eyes on just exactly how much detail is there.
Yeah, and one of these guys here has a tonsure. And he's wearing a different kind of robe. So my guess is that he's a guest in this scene and has moved into ancient times from the Middle Ages. I think he'd be an abbot or something like that. He's clearly a monk with a tonsure. And there's no record of tonsures being worn by any of Jesus's disciples or the Essenes or anybody else at that time. So that's clearly a mark of a monk. So here's somebody else, some blessed saint, because he's got a halo with a tonsure, unless his hair has disappeared, but in 1,000 years, that'll happen to a lot of men. But it is a lovely scene. And here you see, these are Lazarus's sisters. Here's Lazarus, here's Jesus. And here's this person sort of watching off to the side. And then here, this is a very intimate scene once again. But it clearly is leading us through the text in Lent to go from the healing of Jesus straight into the raising of Lazarus. Yes,
Yeah, it looks like Jesus.
okay.
Marked here, looks like Jesus' left hand is on the shoulder, so there's a touch there as well, right?
Yeah. So next week, we start with the raising of Lazarus. And that also is a long text. So if you take a look at your handouts for today, the next text is there. So in the interest of saving paper, if you can bring these back in your pocketbook, I think that would be wonderful. Yeah, or you can leave them here and then we'll just hand them out again next week. So we are opening next week with a Van Gogh of the raising of Lazarus after a painting by Rembrandt. So that's that's a very surprising painting. So that's my little blurb for encouraging you to come back. I think you probably all know, you may know that Van Gogh, Vincent and his brother Theo were the sons of clergymen and that they knew their Bibles well.